In the dusty plains of 1880s Montana, where the wind whispered secrets through the tall grasses and the sun beat down mercilessly on the endless horizons, lived a wealthy rancher named Harlan Blackwood. Harlan owned the largest spread in the territory, the Blackwood Ranch, stretching thousands of acres with herds of cattle that numbered in the tens of thousands. He was a man in his mid-40s, broad-shouldered and rugged, with a face weathered by years under the open sky, piercing blue eyes, and a beard that he kept trimmed short. Harlan had built his empire from nothing after inheriting a small plot from his father, expanding it through sheer grit, smart deals, and a reputation for being unyielding in business. People respected him, feared him even, but few truly liked him. He was widowed, his wife had died in childbirth years ago, leaving him with no children and a heart that had hardened like the dry earth after a long drought. Harlan's ranch was a bustling place, with dozens of hands working the land, branding cattle, mending fences, and driving herds to market. Among the workers was a young woman named Eliza Thorne, a resilient beauty of 22 with long auburn hair that she often tied back in a practical braid, emerald green eyes that sparkled with determination, and a figure that turned heads even in the simple calico dresses she wore for work. Eliza had come to the ranch 2 years earlier, fleeing a troubled past in the East. Her family had fallen on hard times after her father's gambling debts piled up, forcing her to seek employment far from home. She wasn't a typical ranch hand. She worked in the main house as a cook and housekeeper, helping manage the meals for the crew and keeping Harlan's sprawling home in order. But Eliza was no fragile flower. She could ride as well as any man, mend a fence if needed, and handle a rifle when predators threatened the livestock. From the moment Eliza arrived, Harlan noticed her. At first, it was her efficiency, the way she turned chaos into order in his kitchen and home. But soon, it became more. He found himself lingering in the house longer than necessary, making excuses to talk to her about mundane things like the weather or the cattle prices. Eliza was polite but distant, sensing the power imbalance. She needed the job desperately, wages were good here, and the isolation kept her past buried. Yet Harlan's gaze made her uneasy. It was intense, possessive, like he was appraising a prize mare. One fateful evening, after a long day of branding calves that had left everyone exhausted and covered in dust, the ranch hands gathered for supper. Eliza had outdone herself, preparing a feast of roasted beef, fresh biscuits, beans, and apple pie made from the orchard behind the house. The men ate heartily, laughing and sharing stories around the long table in the bunkhouse. Harlan, as the boss, usually ate alone in the main house, but that night he joined them, claiming he wanted to thank the crew personally. His eyes, however, were fixed on Eliza as she served the food, moving gracefully between the tables in her best dress, a simple but elegant blue cotton gown she'd saved up to buy from the catalog, with lace trim at the collar and sleeves that hugged her figure just right. It was the nicest thing she owned, reserved for special occasions, and tonight she wore it to boost her spirits after a grueling week. As the meal wound down, the men dispersed to their bunks or the porch for a smoke. Harlan lingered, nursing a cup of coffee. Eliza began clearing the tables, stacking plates and wiping down surfaces. "You don't have to do that tonight, Miss Thorne," Harlan said, his voice low and gravelly. "Leave it for morning." Eliza paused, straightening up with a stack of dishes in her arms. "It's no trouble, Mr. Blackwood. I like to keep things tidy." She offered a small smile, intending to finish quickly and retreat to her small room off the kitchen. But Harlan stood, blocking her path slightly. The room was empty now, the lantern light casting long shadows. "Eliza," he said, using her first name for the first time, which made her freeze. "You've been a godsend here. The best help I've had in years." His words were complimentary, but his tone carried something heavier. He stepped closer, the scent of whiskey faint on his breath. He'd had a few drinks with the men earlier. Eliza backed up instinctively, her back brushing against the table edge. "Thank you, sir. I appreciate the work." She tried to sidestep, but Harlan reached out, his large hand grasping her arm gently at first, then firmer. "Don't be so formal, Eliza. We're out here alone, no need for that." His eyes roamed over her, lingering on the way the dress accentuated her curves. In a moment of clouded judgment, fueled by loneliness, desire, and the alcohol, Harlan pulled her toward him roughly. Eliza gasped, dropping the dishes with a crash. She struggled, pushing against his chest. "Mr. Blackwood, please, let go." But in the tussle, his hand caught the collar of her dress, yanking hard. The fabric tore with a sickening rip, the lace trimming giving way as the front of the gown split open down to her waist, exposing her chemise underneath. Eliza stumbled back, clutching the torn edges together, her face flushing with shock and humiliation. Tears welled in her eyes as she stared at him. "Don't," she whispered, her voice breaking, "you tore my dress." The words hung in the air, quiet but piercing, full of betrayal and hurt. Harlan released her immediately, stepping back as if burned. His face paled beneath the tan, realization dawning like a thunderclap. What had he done? This wasn't some saloon girl or willing widow, this was Eliza, the woman who'd brought light to his empty home, whom he'd admired from afar but now had assaulted in his own house. Eliza didn't scream or fight further, she simply turned and fled to her room, slamming the door and barring it with a chair. Sobs racked her body as she sat on the bed, holding the ruined dress together. It wasn't just fabric, it was her pride, her one nice thing, a symbol of the better life she was trying to build. Now it was destroyed, just like her sense of safety on the ranch. Harlan stood frozen in the dining hall, staring at the scattered dishes and the torn scrap of lace on the floor. Regret hit him like a branding iron to the chest. He'd always prided himself on being a fair man, honorable in his dealings. But tonight, he'd let his baser instincts take over, and he'd hurt someone innocent. The whiskey soured in his